Hi and welcome to PhotoIQ. This is the landscape module, and in this unit we're going to be talking about directing the viewer's attention, angle of view, and the angle of light. Let's get started. One thing that's just undeniable is that landscapes are one of the more challenging genres of photography, but it has so much to teach us that it's really worth taking our time to master it. Now, landscapes don't move and we don't have to run and catch them and we don't have to be ready for it at a moment's notice. However, the fact that there is so much happening in the landscape, it does present a challenge where we really have to think about what we want to accomplish with it. So let's talk about directing the viewer's attention. Basically, where do you want people to look? Let's take this image for an example that I shot in the Flatirons, which is in Boulder, Colorado. The Flatirons is a really famous rock formation, a mountainscape that's visible from anywhere in the city. And the Flatirons hiking trails, there's many of which that intertwine with each other. And the first time that I had been there, we came around a corner and visible right in the distance was the peak of the Flatirons. And it really is a very special and uniquely shaped mountain peak. So it sort of begs to be photographed. And you can see in this path, when you come around, there's this rocky trail, and then it goes up the hillside. There's a bunch of brush here. On the left-hand side, there's a tree, a ponderosa pine that's here framing the left side of the frame. The branch comes out to the side and it brings your attention right back to the mountain peak. There's a tree here. There's a figure here hiking just ahead of me. If you are looking at that person just for scale within the scene, you follow the path, you can see the person, follow the tree line straight up, and then again it brings your eye right back to the mountain peak. So where do you want the viewer to look? Well, within this frame, it sort of naturally directs the attention to the upper right center where the mountain peak is. So there's naturally a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And it presents a framing with guiding lines to direct your eye to where you want it to be. There's a rich frame with layering and depth within it. There's deep dark blacks over here, and there's bright whites, and there's highlights. Now you can see this is taken around April, and so the sun is still at sort of a lower angle. So it's creating these natural highlights on the southwestern side of the peak. So it just sort of naturally pops and separates off of that blue sky. There's a lot going on here to direct the eye and create a natural focal point. Sometimes you might see a place that looks like it needs to be photographed, but it's just not the right lighting. So it's worth coming back or planning to be there at the right time of day. Now, it's not totally necessary to have a foreground, middle ground, background within your landscapes, because you can shoot a minimalist landscape where there is not a foreground. There's just this formation separated within space. But that tends to be a little bit more surrealistic, where it's not something that we can relate to. It looks more of like a fantastical place that doesn't exist within nature. And that's what makes minimalist landscape really interesting. However, it's not something we can relate to. It's not some place that we can envision in our mind as something that exists or we want to go to. So the foreground, middle ground, background method is a way to relate to something that we are familiar with. It's something that will entice the viewer to want to visit that location. The next method that we use, I've already sort of alluded to, and that is the use of leading lines to direct the eye to where we want it to go. At first, finding the leading lines can be challenging. With more practice, it becomes something that you just naturally see within the space. So like I said, there's this tree on the left-hand side. Again, the branch brings you right back to the mountain. You can follow the rocky path up the edge here, up that tree and back to the peak. You can follow the path, you can see the figure, you can go straight up this tree and then back to the peak. So everything is going to be leading you back to that focal point of the image. Here's an image that I shot at Maroon Bells, which is in a national park near Aspen, Colorado. This was in around June, and you can see that there's plenty of snow on the peak, so that's life up in the mountains in Colorado. This is not a perfect image because it's not shot at the right time of day. Sometimes when I'm on vacation, I'm not trying to get up before dawn so that I can get those amazing images, or sometimes I actually don't know that I'm going someplace and we'll just sort of find our way there, and it turns out it's actually in the middle of the day. A lot of the locations are, they take a little bit of a drive or a long hike to get to, and again, I've mentioned planning your images, and this was not a planned image. However, I am using it because it's a great example of natural leading lines within nature, as well as foreground, middle ground, and background. The use of the leading lines or the foreground, middle ground, background rules are loose. They're meant to be broken, and if something presents itself that just looks right, go ahead and photograph it. It may just be a matter of cropping it. So within this natural scene, you can see that the water presents itself as a perfect foreground element. Whenever you see some water, try to work it into a shot. If you're working on a landscape and you see that there's actually a small pond or a lake or a stream, go and explore that to see if you can work it into the scene, because it may actually create a perfect leading line, a perfect element for the foreground to draw you into that image or create a natural frame. The rippling of the water, even if it's something that is totally still like this, is going to have a little bit of a undulation going on, a little bit of a wave. And that can just be from fish being in there, or from birds, or from a little bit of a wind. The breeze will cause the water to move. And what you're seeing in this image is not actually the light catching the waves, it's actually the light going through the water and then being distorted on the ground in the water, the lake bed. And that is creating that perfect foreground texture to create that natural invitation to bring you further into the image. You can see the shoreline on the right-hand side, again, bringing you into the deep part of the forest back there. This slope on the left-hand side coming down, bringing the attention to the peaks right here, again, bringing you down into that canyon where it's just inviting you to come and hike and come check it out. And that is actually the direction that the hiking path takes. So there is a natural part of nature that invites us, that wants us to come into it. And again, to make this image even better, getting there earlier, right around, I don't know, 6:30 or something like that, I'd probably end up with a better side light and a softer light coming and streaking across these trees to make it an even more dramatic image. Also, a blue sky in the images sometimes is not the best because it doesn't add to the depth at all. It's just a blank canvas up here. I do like a crystal blue sky, and it could be nice. It could be used as an element to separate and just silhouette something. But typically we want some kind of cloud formation in there to add some depth to the background. Here's a much more recent image I photographed only a few weeks ago. Now, something interesting happened after I photographed this. Only a few days after I shot it, there was actually a wildfire very close to this location. Now, thankfully, the park itself wasn't damaged, and it was isolated pretty quickly, and the fire department was able to get to it pretty fast. But the thought did occur to me. The reason we photograph is to capture moments in time, to preserve details as we saw them. If this location had been damaged or destroyed or completely wiped out, as is often the case with wildfires, the photograph that I took possibly could have been the last one taken of this area before it was destroyed. And again, it wasn't destroyed, so everything's okay. This is just a thought experiment. So the reason why we take the photographs is to preserve things, because we can't take for granted that they're always going to exist the way that they are. So getting back to the point of the leading lines, the foreground, middle ground, background, we are definitely trying to practice to develop the natural eye to see these things so that we can identify when a good landscape presents itself. With practice, these things become much more apparent. So we're able to, just within moments of walking upon a scene, we can see how things come together. We create that focal point, the V, the leading lines, taking us into the distance. So if you remember a moment ago on the Maroon Bells photo, I said that the blue sky doesn't exactly offer too much. Well, you can see how much more dramatic this sky is, because if there were no clouds, yes, it would still be sunset, but there would be nothing to catch the light within the sky. So the only thing happening in the scene would be the grass and the mountains, but you can see that the sky adds so much more to the image. So within this scene, there's a number of things that are working for it. We have the natural leading line of the hiking path right here, taking us into the distance. There's another path onto the right side, so it almost creates like a V formation, okay, as it sits within that central point. Now the focus would start here, bring us down to here, and then into the empty space or into the distance here. So this is bringing us here, and then we can follow it up here, and then your eye can follow all the way up the hill, catching all the light highlights and looking at the trees and things like that. So there's a lot to look at. It's off-centered, and the way that I like to explain weighting in an image is that we have dark tones and light tones. The dark tones are obviously heavier, right? So they have more of an impact in the image, where light tones are light not only in color but also in weight. They have less of an impact in the frame. So if you want to try to balance them together, you need to have an equal amount of weight between the two, and that's not the size, it's how much weight they hold. Okay, so if we were to say, this much grass, this much green tone down here is worth 10 pounds, well, we're gonna have to double it in sky, because the sky tone is only worth, say 5 pounds. So we have to have twice as much of it to offset the darkness of the grass. Now, when we were walking in this path, we came around and immediately I recognized that this was an image, or it could be an image. The sky was not quite as dramatic as you see here. I did have to do a lot of processing to it to bring out that tones, to separate the highlights from the shadows, and to add a little bit more drama to it. But that is completely within the realm of what's acceptable when we process our images. The way that I saw it is the way that you see it here. So here's a sunset that I photographed in Hawaii. This is on the southeastern shore of Oahu from a nice high vantage point. So I was able to get over this bay and show the houses and the neighborhoods in the foreground, and silhouetted against the water, you can see all the palm trees. And then of course in the distance you can see the hill peaks over here, and just off the frame is the sun setting over here. So this not having the sun within the frame, there's a couple of reasons why that's happening. One is that the attention, or the objects, or the action happening off the edge of the frame here is not that attractive. So if I were to pan left just a little bit, there would have been a parking lot and then a road, and these are things that I just wouldn't want in the frame. They wouldn't add anything to the frame. There would be no benefit to having them there. So the sun being just off the edge of the frame, now it would have been nice to be able to get that additional yellow glow in there, but there would have been a sacrifice in adding a parking lot and some vehicles that I definitely did not want in the frame. Next, again, you can see a dramatic sky that is adding a lot to the image. Now, going back to the reference of the weighting, okay, so we have a really bright, large, colorful sky, and then we have a very dark foreground band across the bottom of the image. So the depth and the weight of this bottom is anchoring the image down and allowing all of this space up here to have its attention and not feel like it's too large. It's balancing each other out. So we have this darkness over here in shadow, and then it starts to transition into that gold yellow tone, into the bright, the brightness of the sun that's setting here. And then we have some dark clouds over here. So you can see that it has sort of like a horseshoe of dark colors and dark tones that are very heavy and weighting down the image, offset by the size of the brightness of the setting sun. Okay, so we're creating balance between the two. So getting familiar with your north and your south, your east and your west is going to help you to achieve capturing sunsets and sunrises and capturing images at the correct time of day. If you live in the northern hemisphere, the sun is always going to be a little bit to the south. It's never going to be directly overhead. And of course it rises in the east and it sets in the west. And if you're in North America, it's going to be setting in the southwest. The further south you go, the more westerly the sun is going to get, but within the continental United States, it's always going to be a little bit to the southwest. So having a compass or having a compass app on your phone will always help you out when you're trying to determine which direction to face to get the best light. Now, I don't like to have the sun at my back when I'm photographing a landscape. Of course, sometimes that can't be avoided. It's best to well, I don't want to say it's best because of course it's preference. Whatever you want to do with your image is whatever you want to do with your image, and that's totally fine. What I like to do is to have the sun off to the side of the image so that it creates those side lights to separate objects from the background. Now, having the sun directly behind an object in your frame sometimes can be tough too, but knowing which way you want the sun to be in orientation to your subject is going to definitely help you out to know where to position yourself. If you're trying to preempt the location of the sun to sort of get set up or choose your angle, then having a compass will tell you which direction the sun is going to set. And that will give you more time to sort of predict what you're going to be looking at and what the image will look like. So first determine which direction are you facing, north or south, east, west. What angle of light will you get at whatever time of day? It's very easy to find out what time the sun will set given the day of the year. So if you're in the spring or the late fall, the sun is going to be setting kind of early. Once you get into the middle of the summer, now you're talking about an 8:30 sunset or even later in some cases. You also have to consider your elevation. Are you up really high and is there a very low horizon to your west? That's going to mean that you have a much longer duration for that sun to be hitting wherever you are. Or if the object you're looking at is extremely high, there could be a mountain that's jutting out of the landscape and reaching up to a really high elevation. Maybe it's 4,000 feet above where you are. If you want to try to get that, there actually could be kind of an interesting last light on that peak that could be 20 minutes later than the light hitting the ground where you are. So consider these things: elevation, angle, time of year. These are all the things that will really help you out. Now with sunrise, you can actually get some very interesting effects that you would not get with a sunset. When the sun is rising in the cool of the evening, or I'm sorry, in the cool of the morning, then there's going to be some things like fog. There could be mist in the air that will create sort of a glow that you wouldn't get with a sunset, because when the sun is setting, the day has already been warm. It's burned off any fog or mist. So when the sun sets, you're going to be getting a clearer form of light. And of course, the sun is going to rise in the east and set in the west. So if you're on the east coast and you want to get that beautiful light glow coming in on the beach or something like that, it's going to have to be a sunrise because the sun is going to set behind the beach. Now, if you're on the west coast, the sun is going to set facing the beach. So if you wanted to get the light coming into the beach, then you need to be there at sunset. If you were on a beach on the west coast at sunrise, the light is going to be at the back. So it's going to be coming in opposite the water. Now that is going to really determine how this image is going to look. There are some places where there's going to be an exception to that. There could be some jetties that come out. There could be peninsulas. Say, for example, Long Island. There could be beaches on the western shore of Long Island where when the sun is setting, it's actually going to be setting over the water. So there are going to be some exceptions to the rule, but of course you need to put a little brain power into considering where you are and what the geography looks like. So pull out a map and take a look to see if you're going to be able to get the effect that you desire. One important thing to remember is that the sky opposite the sun is going to be darker in color, darker in tone. So if we take this photo, for example, I shot this from a skyscraper in Manhattan, and you can see the sunset. Now this is actually in late December, and so the sun is at a very strong southwestern angle. Because at this time of the year, the sun never really gets very high in the sky. It kind of does this low arc across the horizon. And it does create some very beautiful sunset effects though, because it's coming in at such a strong angle. So all the tops of these buildings, this is the very last light of the day, and the Empire State Building here has some great highlighting on the side. Now you can see around it, now I did enhance this a little bit to try to bring out more of that sky tone, but the sky is lighter around the sun. The further away from the sun you get, the darker the tones. So if you want to try to get that full panorama of the sky, make sure that you have an unobstructed view, otherwise you're only going to be getting the lighter part of the sky and you'll be missing some of that color. The fade is really what's very special about the sunset. It's very beautiful. If I back up a couple frames, you can see that example again. Around the sun is light, and as you get further away from the sun, the sky gets darker in tone. Same thing here. The sun is just out of frame over here, and it's nice and light pale blue. As you get further away, the sky gets darker. Next, let's talk about angle of view. A lower angle will create more texture and shadow, as opposed to, say, our normal eye view or getting up higher. When you get nice and low, you're going to be creating a lot of texture within the frame. The same is true for water with waves, or with grass, or with snow, or rocks, or anything like that. Anything that has an opportunity to create that glinting light off of it is going to create a texture or a separation from the background. So if you were to look closely at this image, you'd be able to see that there is a bright color surrounded by, it's a silhouette against the black shadow. Now in this image, I'm holding for the highlights, and it is making sure that everything that's highlighted within the frame has tone. Okay, so a lot of the shadows do get very deep and dark and they fall away, but that's just creating that high contrast scene so that all of this grass is highly visible and readable. It's also maintaining that sort of yellow straw color to make sure that the frame stays nice and rich. Now again, we have our foreground here, we have the middle ground with the trees back here and this hillside, and the background with the sun setting right behind that peak. Now one really good thing that low angles will do is that it's going to give a lot more prominence or importance to small objects. So say you're on a beach, a rocky beach, there is going to be given a lot more focus and importance to those little pebbles that are on the beach. Whereas if you were standing up, they'd be very small in frame. So the grass here is being given importance because I'm lower and because it's being backlit by the sun. If I were standing up at a normal height or taking it from a different vantage point, this grass would just look like a carpet rather than something that we're looking through. Now here's something a little bit different from a low angle. I'm on an elevated position here looking over the rolling hills. And this is something that is going to give you a different perspective because you get to see what's over the horizon. If I was on a low angle, like in the last image, then the image would basically end right about here, and you would just have the mountains rising up in the background. This is a pasture that I shot in Hawaii that I was able to visit, or I was able to view from a hiking trail, and there's a goat herder herding his goats at the end of the day, bringing them in. And you can see that they're all huddled in the shadow over here, and he's right over here as he's trying to get their attention. And anyone who's ever had goats knows that that's not an easy job because goats have a mind of their own. And I can only imagine what this guy goes through on a daily basis. But you can see the sun, again, just off the frame, obscured by the leaves and by the dense clouds here. But it's so strong that it's blasting through and highlighting the rolling hills and highlighting the plants over here. And there's this really pretty orange glow that's going on. And it's just a really beautiful scene. And then again, in the background, dramatic clouds where they are breaking through this mountainside right here so that the peaks are just visible through that dense cloud cover. There's a lot going on: foreground, middle ground, background, leading lines where we have frame over here bringing you in back to the hillside, this frame over here bringing you back into the hillside, and then your focal point, which is basically this big oval over here where we have the goat herder and all of his goats. Now, if we were a little bit lower within this frame, you would still get all of the basic information in the frame, but seeing what's over the hill and having the rolling hills that are going on back here, there's a home here, that adds context to the image and a depth to it that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And again, for comparison to the low angle view, if we back up to here, remember how I was saying how if we were much higher, the grass would just look like a carpet versus this rough texture that's drawing attention to itself? Well, if we go forward to this one, you can see there is a lot of thick, high grass, but because it's low in the frame, we're looking down on it, it creates basically just a carpet, a background for the image. It's really not integral to the image other than the fact that there's a dominant green color throughout the frame. We're not actually able to read individual grass blades or anything like that. Okay, now it's time to get to your assignment. Your assignment in Unit 1 was to scout out and try to find a location that'd be suitable for a landscape. Well, now it's time to go back there, plan your shoot, and execute it. I want you to shoot one high angle, a normal angle, and a low angle image. So 3 images of one location. Now I want you to observe all the safety rules. If you're at a park and it says don't climb the trees, don't climb the trees. I don't want you to climb a ladder if it's not safe, or climb up on someone's roof. Observe all private property rules. So you know, if the location that you chose isn't suitable for this assignment, go ahead and try to find a new location that might be better. What this is going to do is it's going to stretch you out and try to analyze a scene a little bit better. Sometimes when you get up to a higher vantage point, you're able to get a different look at things and appreciate it in a different way. Sometimes if you get low, you'll be able to appreciate it in a different way. Such as if you're on a beach and you're able to get down nice and low and highlight those pebbles, those sea stones, river stones, things like that. That is going to give a new appreciation to the scene. Try to highlight something that otherwise may be overlooked. So keep your eyes open, trying to find a unique special detail about your location. Sometimes getting to a high vantage point can be just standing on the roof of a car or standing on the bed of a pickup truck. You don't need to get really high, like, on top of a building. If that's possible and you can shoot out a window, go ahead and try. But there are no real rules to what high, medium, and low really means. That's kind of up to your interpretation, okay? So have fun with this assignment, and I hope to see you in the next lesson. Until then, keep shooting.